And then, based on that analysis, I can separate them into 4 clusters that every cluster have own characteristic of them. For the cluster 1, it have the orientation to the entrepreneur dynamics. And then for the cluster 2, the orientation to the entrepreneur dynamics and also the performance of management. For the cluster 3, it don't have the orientation to the entrepreneur dynamics and the performance of management. And for the cluster 4, it have the orientation to the performance management. I will explain more for each cluster after this. This is the explanation of cluster 1. Cluster 1 has 10 members of SMEs. The explanation of each criteria from enterprise characteristics type that this business, the average is a small business with 5 employees, and this business still survive in the original business and already open for 6 months. And the last one is this business quite a change of customer demand data. And then from the entrepreneur characteristic, this business conducted by young entrepreneurs which have 0 until 6 months experience, and then the average have a diploma degree. For the entrepreneur dynamics, this business have a fixed turnover, no business transition. Changes in the business principle of this cluster were quite influential on the business performance. And then adequate of satisfaction level and level of competition was considered quite high. For the last one, performance management type of the criteria, this business have a leadership in the standard scale, have a good planning, normal flow of information, service to the customer, and quality management were maintained in a very fairly good condition. The suitability of the worker and the amount of work was considered in the standard situation. This is the explanation of Cluster 2. Cluster 2 have 27 members of SME. For the criteria, the first one, enterprise characteristics. This business usually in a large business scale with 12 until 14 employees, have a lot of change from the original business and it reached until 50%. The business running well, more than 1.5 years. The changes of customers' demand were very high in this cluster. For the entrepreneur characteristics, these entrepreneurs have the age plus minus or average over than 30 years, have the experience of more than 1 year, and they average have the bachelor degree or more for the education. For the entrepreneur dynamics, this business have a turnover in increased level, many experiencing transition with an average of 2 times transition. The business principles are very influential on the performance. Have a normal course of business satisfaction, and the last one, this business have a very high competition. For the performance management, this business already have a good leadership, have a good planning for the metric performance, the flow of information in the ordinary scale, and number of workers with sufficient number of suitable jobs. And the last one is the treatment of customer is very good group, very good in this. This is the explanation of cluster 3. Cluster 3 have 25 members of SMEs. The explanation of each characteristic. For the first one, enterprise characteristic. It usually in a small business with 5 employees, and it changed in the business reached 25% from the original. It has been running for almost 1.5 years. The resignation of this business is 1 until 2 employees. The customer demand changes in the standard scale. For the entrepreneur characteristic, the entrepreneur have an average age almost 30 years and have an average education of them were diploma degree, and the experience of them more than 1 year. The entrepreneur dynamic, it declines of turnover. The transition of the business has reached about one-time transition. This business has a change principle of the business, then it can affect it with the standard scale. The entrepreneurs are less satisfied with their business. Maybe it's because of high competitors in it. And the last one is performance management. This business usually have normal leadership. The performance planning was also quite influential on business performance. Have a flow of information was considered ordinary. The number of workers was not appropriate with the number of jobs. It can be more employee or less employee compared to the number of the jobs. The quality management system and the treatment to the customer were quite good. This is the last cluster. Cluster 4 have 38 members of SMEs. The explanation of each characteristic, the first one is enterprise characteristic. This cluster have a small business with 5 employees, no change from the original business. They run in a long time, maybe more than 1.5 years. And then the data requests from its customer have any changes. For the entrepreneur characteristic, the entrepreneur have an average age more than 30 years, and they already have a very long experience, which is more than 1 year, and the average education is diploma degree. For the entrepreneur dynamics, this business have a fixed turnover. No business transition in here, and the principle that changes in this business affect sufficiently influence on business performance. The owner have the satisfaction of business in a standard situation, and also very high numbers of competitors. For the performance management, the leadership skill felt pretty good in business planning. Performance affects business performance. The flow of information on this business was quite well, and there were quite a number of workers. The quality management system in this business was quite good, and this cluster did very good treatment of their customers. For the verification analysis, this is the explanation. To ensure proper clustering in this study, this analysis was conducted based on canonical discriminant analysis. The verifying of this study performed on 4 clusters and 20 variables. Discriminant analysis is used primarily to predict membership in 2 or more mutually exclusive groups. The table will explain about the result of the eigenvalues and Wilks lambda discriminant analysis. The analysis revealed that the discriminant function had eigenvalues of 44.413 with canonical correlation of 0.989. An eigenvalue indicates the proportion of variance explained. between groups sums of square divided by within groups sums of square. A large eigenvalue is associated with a strong function. From these values, the associated in this study are very strong. The canonical correlation is the correlation between the discriminant scores and the level of dependent variable. A high correlation indicates a function that discriminates well. The present correlation of 0.989 was extremely high. Why? Because 1 is perfect. Which lambda is the ratio of within group sum of squares to the total sums of squares. This is the proportion of the total variance in the discriminant score not explained by differences amongst groups. A lambda of 1 occurs when observed group means are equal. All the variance is explained by factors other those between difference than means. While a small lambda occurs when the within group's variability is small compared to the total variability. The small group of lambda indicates that means appear to differ. The associated significance values indicate whether the difference is significant. In this study, the value of Wilks lambda was 0.022 with the significant level of 0. The conclusion was, in this study, the value of Wilks lambda at the very low position, and it indicates that the group means appear to differ. For the conclusion, the research was conducted by obtaining information from the perspective of business owners that may have been the result of the response didn't necessarily represent the concrete result in the field. It could be argued that the results of this study were not necessarily reliable for the desired result. This study was focused to successful independent SMEs to have a broad market in Indonesia. The result was known that the number of clusters corresponding to successful independent SMEs was 4 clusters that have different characteristics from each cluster. For the further research is better by asking these variables not only to the owner of the business, but it can be asked to the 50% of the employees in that business. From this data, it will approach the desired result, which will be valid and reliable. Moreover, it can be done similar research on SMEs with the further research could focus on one particular type of the business. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening my presentation. Goodbye.